Yeah.
I'd say Rich probably have.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. This is a joint city council planning commission meeting. It's Wednesday, December 11th. The time is 4:01 PM. Our first order is a plaque to Mr. Dan Carey, our chairperson for the planning commission.
Yeah.
It's an honor to give this to you, Dan.
Thank you.
You've definitely put in a lot of late night hours. I heard you guys talking last night about planning commission to an applicant Reed. About how sometimes they can go till 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Happened.
We call it the next day.
So, I just, we want to thank you for all your service. It's a thankless job. There's a lot of big decisions that the planning commission makes. And, I love your passion for the Camas Gray. I'll tell everybody a story about that later. But, just in your thoughtfulness and your education in the wetlands too, that you bring to our community has been extremely grateful for that. So.
When Allison Charbonneau left, she was kind of the only natural resource person on the planning commission. She said, you should join because there's an opening. So
Yep.
I wanted to be a part of helping out my community and doing some public service. I worked for the state for almost 20 years. And so new public service and on a local level, it's kind of nice to know what's going on and have a finger in it. And been enjoyable, boring at times, exciting at times, frustrating at times. Worked with some great planning commissioners. One thing our planning commission, for the most part, has been very cooperatively working together. We have had good teams, changed over the years. I'm not the longest running person on the planning commission. I think Bill Amos was like 23 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And couple last year retired at 15 years. So it seemed like the right time for me. And so thank you for having faith in me all those years. Sometimes the chairman, sometimes the vice chairman. And
We appreciate your leadership. You did a great job. We're gonna miss you.
yeah, you might be the next chairman.
Yeah,
I said, we're gonna miss you.
Your incoming chair.
I'm the most, we don't know that yet. I'm the most senior person on the board though. Which is strange after all the people that have been there so long.
Well, hang in there. I think the planning commission is still in good shape. And with another person added later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure getting to work with you on the planning commission.
David
Oh.
Rosengard,
Oh,
planning commissioner.
Yeah, I couldn't physically get there by 4 this afternoon. I'm still technically at work.
it's good that we have almost a full quorum.
Yeah.
Well, we have another position to fill now, so if anybody knows, it's been published that we have an opening. We need to fill one more position.
So you guys did accept Reed last night or to submit to the
Yeah.
council?
Yeah.
Nice.
That's up to you guys now.
Yeah.
Weren't there a couple other applicants prior to the closing date though too?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
True.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 'cause
Let's,
you expected to interview 3, but you only have.
yeah, we had some dropouts
Yeah.
and last minute stuff. Just to keep things rolling, I think Crystal wants to get a photo.
I just say the best part of the planning commission is working with you two. You guys are great.
Oh,
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
When weirdos were out here, I could look over and I would see a friendly face and thinking the same. So it's nice.
Yeah.
Appreciate
That's what I thought. It's
right
like, say
audience.
that he's going out.
That's, welcoming words, Dan.
Yeah, we'll miss you.
Where?
Up there, behind that.
I'm out going.
Okay, sure.
But not by
I know.
my decision.
That's your last meeting.
Hey.
All right. Very well deserved, Dan. Like I said, 15 years is a long time, so. um, Okay, let's go on to our second item, which is a discuss draft economic policies and actions. So
Want to do it, do a quick.
Do a quick intro. Why are we doing this project?
Okay, so our last economic opportunities analysis was adopted in 2009. So it's getting a little long in the tooth. And personally, the circumstances at the time, I've always been a little uneasy just because I thought it was done kind of quickly. And so we've been updating a lot of our plans, and this is one of them. And so we're through that process. We're towards the end of the pre-adoption process. I think this is the last meeting before that, just to get people up to speed on what this is. And we have Eco Northwest helping us, which I think is going to take it from there.
Hey, I'm Beth Goodman from Echo Northwest. And so I've met a number of you before. We talked about the results of the economic opportunities analysis back, I don't know, it seems like summer or 10 or 20 years ago. But you've got the document in front of you. That's item 3 on our agenda. What we intend to do here is go through the economic development policies and actions page by page. We will not be doing that with the EOA unless people have specific page comments on it. And the idea is to get all of your input so that we can revise this as we need to prior to going into adoptions, so that nobody's surprised by what's in here. What we've done with our advisory committee, which Jennifer is on and your mayor is on, is develop the assumptions for the economic opportunities analysis, ground truth a lot of the information out of that with them. And then spend a couple of meetings working through these draft goals and policies. And if either of you have comments on how that process went, certainly I would encourage you to make any comments you need. But what we think we have here is a reflection of what we think Echo Northwest thinks you need for your comprehensive plan for your goals and policies, so that you're meeting the requirements of goal 9. And then also that it's accurately reflecting your economic conditions, the opportunities, and that there are actions in there that the city staff will take over the next 5 years or so to implement these policies. So this is really in part about updating your comprehensive plan, goals and policies for the economy, updating your fact base, the economic opportunities analysis for your comprehensive plan, and then giving you a set of actions to take over the next few years. And well, we need to get this right. And getting it right means incorporating your input. So before I go on and start walking through what we've got in front of us, are there any questions or comments? Okay.
One question, are other, I would imagine other towns are doing the same thing,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
going all the way across the state.
If I call you Scappoose, it's just because I'm working in Scappoose right now.
Okay.
And I've made this mistake 3 or 4 times because evidently I can only have one city in Columbia County. We're doing this for a number of other cities also.
And then you have also committees such as that we have here.
Mhm.
Okay, it's just, I just wanted to establish. that.
yeah, the
For somebody
process,
else.
I guess the process to this point has been, we put together a committee, Jennifer and I were both on that. There was business owners. We had 3 meetings on getting it to this far. And as far as checking grammar, apostrophe S on St.
Oh,
Helens.
we don't have an apostrophe there and spelling things right.
Yes.
So what I would say is there's a set formula essentially for an EOA. It always has an inventory of buildable land, so land that is unconstrained with your natural resource hazards, unconstrained, technically buildable. It always has an employment forecast. It has information about the city's competitive and comparative advantages and disadvantages. That those are always present in an EOA. That's what's written in state administrative rules. When we do this work, like I think we've been working on about 5 of them. The thing that is literally in common among them all is the state and national trends. Because that doesn't change if you're looking at an EOA in Eugene versus in St. Helens. But all the other things are St. Helens specific. And I will say that each of your staff people here have reviewed it, and I don't think we've got comments yet from John, but I'm expecting some comments from him.
My comments are that community and economic development is kind of my passion, and this is the first of these types of exercises that since I've been with the city that I haven't been directly involved with. Just hands off doing other priorities, but you know, as I read through it, I'm pretty impressed, and I see our investment in Columbia Economic Team. You know, not so many years ago, we were really, the council was questioning their investment. You know, what do we get for our money out of this group? And boy, it's turned around, and
They were very involved.
yeah, they're super helpful. The city's investment in starting up the Small Business Development Center, city's investment in supporting the bringing the Grow Initiative here, which brings $100,000 a year for 5 years. And then we're having Columbia Economic Team administer that, so it's kind of gets out of house. I think it's a regional approach, but it's still excellent. And, just the shift in the DMO tourism, the city was the only people doing tourism in the entire county for a lot of years, and having them pick it up, move forward, working with Travel Oregon, Travel Portland, and Travel Oregon. It's really impressive. So
Good.
I feel really good about that.
And I would say economic development is all economic development professionals talk about is a team sport. It's as much as anything about your partnerships and how you're working together with your partners as it is about getting your land use right, which is also something we're paying a lot of attention to.
Well, I mentioned it in one of our meetings, and I'd like to say that I've sat on a couple committees, and it's the best one that I've sat on. You really listen to us as a group. I don't know if you felt that, Rick, but everybody had a say, everybody had an input, and I appreciated it.
I'm very glad.
Yeah.
So now it's your opportunity for input. I would really like not to read all of this aloud, because I'm not a good reader alouder. But I also want to give you time as we go through, starting on page 3 of your packet, to take a few moments and process what's on the page. And I'd like to go goal by goal, talk about the policies and then talk about the actions. And where you have comments or questions, let's just talk through them. I will say that, each goal deals with a different topic. So if you're like, are we going to talk about zoning at some point? The answer is almost certainly yes. We just haven't gotten to it, or tourism or whatnot. So the first goal is it's a broad goal about encouraging growth of a healthy, stable, and diversified economic base for commercial and industrial businesses. That's the part I'll read aloud. I'll also mention that we went through your existing goals and policies, which are older, and incorporated them and updated them, and then added based on what we saw in the technical work and the economic opportunities analysis and what we heard from our committee. So there's been a fair bit of wordsmithing that's gone into this. That's not to say there can't be more, because there sure can. But that's what we've been doing. So I'm going to pause for a few moments, let you all read through the policies, and then ask if there's any questions about policies or things that we forgot. What did we get wrong, essentially? So David, if you have comments, I'm hoping that you'll just interrupt a little bit and speak up.
I will, yes, no problem.
Thank you. So when you're done, just look up and. Yeah, thank you. That's very helpful. So these are your basic economic development policies. We're basically saying we're gonna do economic development and pay attention to things like business attraction, business retention, entrepreneurship, so growing businesses, that kind of thing. Are there any comments? We can always come back if at the end you haven't heard something that you expected to hear or seen something you expected to see. Are there any comments about the action, about the policies here? You get any words wrong, missing anything? Yes, sir.
I think one thing that we're missing is that our greatest asset is just out over here.
And that's a little bit later.
Okay.
So, yep. Yeah, we started writing the EOA and we weren't writing about it, and I'm like, Nicole, my colleague who was helping on this. We need to talk about that riverfront thing. Well, it's kind of important.
They're saying the river itself could be true.
And that is in the last set of actions, or one of the last set. So,
I guess the one question I have, that was brought up to us by somebody outside, in the second bullet, star, whatever you want to call it, talks about trying to focus on industries such as manufacturing and healthcare.
mhm.
And I guess I wondered about why we don't like have some kind of a look at high tech.
Well, manufacturing, so high tech can come under manufacturing. It can also come under things like information. It can come into a lot of different places. So if you're talking about high tech in terms of hardware, that would come under manufacturing. If you're talking about high tech in terms of software development, then that often comes in other places. And we can talk some about high tech. Y'all don't have a big natural opportunity around high tech. I mean, so the place that you do is for software development firms. They can kind of locate anywhere. And you know, my husband's a software developer who has essentially been a remote employee for 26 years in Eugene.
And I was gonna say, I did note down in several bullets lower, the idea that we're talking about remote workers,
Mm-hmm.
which, you know, my company's been dealing with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are, and
Yeah.
with our river and our natural resources we have, I think we're a prime place to try to attract people that do have that remote work capability.
You certainly are.
Yeah, it's in there somewhere. We talked
Okay.
about it, yeah.
Yeah, there is I think a good discussion of remote work in here. The only piece that might be worth underscoring or teasing out a bit is that I know St. Helens, coming out of the downtown core, does have access to a pretty robust private or residential fiber network, which, if you are someone working in a remote space where you are doing work that requires a fair amount of bandwidth, is pretty attractive and not available everywhere.
It certainly is, and that is something that I think is one of your your comparative advantages, is having that faster fiber network, that kind of thing. So yes, remote work is certainly an opportunity. I would think that, you know, if you're trying to your advantage for trying to compete with the Hillsboroughs of the world is that you actually have industrial land. You have industrial land that has plans for more electricity to it. And so you've got an industrial land base that is different than, and a lot of ways better than, an awful lot of other cities. I work all across the state, so I can say that with some confidence. Your disadvantage for hardware development is you're up Highway 30. So you're just, you know, a little out of the beaten path, but then you've got, you know, the Cornelius Pass Road, that kind of thing. We can mention high tech. It's just not something that in any way has risen to the top. But it's something that if the city wants to grow that kind of thing, you can look at actions to do that kind of growth. So. Are there other comments or questions?
I have one, but I think it's gotta wait for later.
What's the topic?
Well, just how to get these folks out here. How to draw them in.
Are we talking about workers? Are we talking about businesses?
Businesses.
Yes, I think we've got some things about that. If we don't have sufficient, then let's talk about it as we get towards the end. That's okay.
That's what I figured.
I'm just kind of, I was whispering to him, there's a high-tech industry already coming in, a data center.
Mm-hmm.
It could be the catalyst for more.
Do
Oh,
you have a small data center coming in, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Yeah, there's not an application yet, but we do have a pre-application scheduled next week.
There's lots of discussions about this. So we can add and high tech to that bullet point. And I'm gonna go ahead and move us on unless there's other questions. Let's go look at the actions. So I do want to talk for a moment about the first action, which is hiring a community economic development specialist to improve coordination with organization and businesses to make St. Helens a more business-friendly city. So this is reflecting the fact that you don't have somebody who's specializing in that, whose job it is to go out and talk to businesses, whose job it is to help businesses figure out how to get through your regulatory process and to turn over like very specific zoning questions or permit questions to Jacob or Jenny. So this is when you ask the question of how to get people out here, this is one of the key actions for that is having a little more capacity to do this collaboration to act as that go-between. And so we're trying not here to write a job description for this person because of course that would be a much bigger effort and it's not appropriate in here. But the idea is to get some of the things they may do. And, you know, you'd probably look at balancing what that new person would do among what your existing people do and seeing how to plug them in most effectively. The important thing is a person who's focused on economic development, business attraction, business retention, entrepreneurship, so growing businesses, and then coordination with other folks. And then I'm gonna stop reading the rest of those. But these are things in our interviews with businesses. Part of what we heard was, you know, St. Helens process is, you know, confusing because we are businesses and we don't know government processes. I'm not saying that St. Helens processes are more confusing or staff are less helpful than in other cities. I'm just saying we're a little smaller, we're a little further, you know, outside of Portland here. There needs to be a little more help. So things like, you know, creating a how to do business in St. Helens packet, which the Small Business Development Center,
Yep.
I forget what his name is.
Jason Moon.
Jason said, hey, that's something I can help with. So coordinating with him, that kind of thing. So the actions here are really essentially designed to help businesses interact with the city better and make sure the necessary coordination is going on.
Yeah, because they were part of that committee. Jason Moon, SBDC, Paul Vogel, CSAT was another part. Who else? Wella, the county,
SAS
Community SAS, yes.
here in Salisbury.
Yeah.
Holcomb was busy. We invited him. We had Brad Hendrickson with the marina,
Philip, yeah,
and
and
Phil Stanton, property owner. Yeah, it was a pretty diverse group. And this we kind of hammered this bullet, that staff person
We
pretty quite a bit. They wanted to make sure it wasn't duplicating duties that they already do as organizations, that it would complement the duties that they do for economic development. Which makes sense.
what it came across as from public comment was, and it is, it's a breakdown within the city itself of confusion for trying to just even get start of a business, you know, people go ahead and get a building and start doing some things, the cart before the horse, before they've reached out and see what the cans are cans and zonings and stuff like that. So was part of it. The other part is just the process steps. That's what we heard,
Yeah.
right?
Question, that survey came out of that committee, right?
We didn't do a survey. This was a discussion in that
Same
committee.
people you were just referring to that were all in the committee, was there a survey that was?
Yes, there was, but you guys reached out to somebody, right?
So
Do a survey.
that's the Keep Local group. Are you referring to the survey results that were presented to council a week ago or a couple weeks ago?
So it was one that throughout the county, so it broke down the businesses, the micro businesses.
Yeah, that wasn't part of this process, but yeah, very
You said
information.
Okay, yeah, it's.
that, Paul.
Didn't you guys interview some select people?
We did interview a few people and Nicole did those interviews.
Yeah.
She just couldn't be here tonight. And Jenny probably remembers who we interviewed. But it was people doing business within the city who we thought would, they were either building owners who worked with a lot of small businesses, that kind of thing. So trying to get a wide range of issues put on the table.
Are you aware of anybody in a city our size that has this position so that we could kind of see how that functions for them?
We are, we're about 10,000 people here, right? 15, all right. Wilsonville has, and Wilsonville's, obviously they're inside of Metro, but they're not that much bigger. Lebanon is bigger, but not a lot bigger. They're like twice your size. They've got that position. Those are the couple that come right off the top of my head. But I can ask my my colleagues about cities this size that have that kind of position. Yeah.
And so some of those things that that person does, this small business, SBDC said they would do, Jason Moon and Paul Vogel, they have some of those materials available. So but yes, I think also Independence might have one of these.
That's the one I was gonna ask about.
Yeah.
The economic
Because of the
development
waterfront.
director at the city of Independence does
Yes.
this work.
So it's definitely something that, of course, it comes down to finances.
Yep.
Inflation and, you know, but it's a valuable piece.
We're recommending the same sort of thing for Cottage Grove, which is about 11,000 or so people.
There's financial aid that you can look for.
So that is not something we've specifically investigated. Sometimes hiring staff using grants, that kind of thing, can be a little unsustainable. So I just caution you in that way, but that's not something that I can really tell you.
If you have the right person with the urban renewal, it kind of helps pay for itself because you can take a percentage of that urban renewal money for administration.
So, yeah, we've
So,
suggested
yes.
partially funding the position through urban renewal.
Very, very valuable person, but it's gotta be the right person. You know, I mean, that's big position.
The way we've been handling it is in our investments with our partners with Columbia Economic Team and all the subsidiaries that are developed out of that arm, making investments in those without having that staff contact. And there's a disconnect there for sure.
Yeah, but right now, if I ever had somebody, I would call Paul and he would actually have them fill out some information. And then he would take it from there. CSAT would, so.
And with that role, would that do coordination with the state?
Yes,
Some incentives and
yes,
things like that?
they absolutely line them up. Melanie Olson, yes, they would
Okay,
get everybody involved. Yep.
that's what, we just are in the process of opening a battery plant now in Mississippi. And it really ticked me off that we didn't
Get
end
some,
up doing it in Oregon.
Yeah.
Someplace.
Yeah.
And you talk about having the industrial land available. remember exactly how large that plant is, but it,
They often need a really big site.
Yeah.
You know, like 200, 300, 400 acres.
Yeah.
And that's tough to find in Oregon. Even out in Eastern Oregon, that's tough.
I think it was actually bigger than that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So yeah, coordinating with Business Oregon, would certainly be, I would expect. And frankly, implementing a bunch of the actions that are in here. We've got a lot of actions. Without that kind of person, this is hard to do. So. Because your staff's already, you know, a little busy.
Yes, yeah.
Are there any other comments on the actions here? Otherwise, I'll go on to Golby. I'll go ahead and move us on. Goal B is ensuring that St. Helens has sufficient land and infrastructure capacity to support a diverse range of employment opportunities. The goal after this, ends up being about attraction and retention. We've got, small business growth. We've got some things about commercial and industrial land, coming up as well. So those things are all coming up. One of the things that you guys have, one of your really interesting assets is of course the industrial park. With, you know, city-owned land, so you're in control of what can happen in that, if you have the right user, as well as your infrastructure plans, including electricity plan, that kind of thing. It's a pretty interesting asset. A lot of cities don't have anything like that, and they certainly often don't own the land. So an important part to this is coordinating your land with your capital improvement programs. So making sure that you have your water, your wastewater, your transportation correct with that, making sure that your partners who are providing other types of services, such as electricity or natural gas or high-speed internet, making sure the service is available where it's needed. So that's what these goals, policies are all about. Are there any comments on those?
If we had some big tech that needed lots of water, we know that we need to do some water for the industrial lands, just so people who are gonna be at the helm understand that probably should be addressed.
And we have documented that in your economic opportunities analysis, where we talk about water and wastewater facilities.
Mhm.
So,
Wastewater facility is sufficient. It's the water side and power,
yes,
or it's all things power.
yes.
That's bad.
So then the actions on this, you know, start off with a number of things that are about partnering with different utility districts or different partners, state partner companies, that kind of thing, to make sure that you have sufficient infrastructure, another electricity, that kind of thing. And looking at making sure that you're doing your regional coordination around regional high-speed internet. Monitoring your land base, so as areas develop, especially big areas, making sure that you're thinking about the point at which you start to run a little bit lower on land, so that you know when you need to revisit this kind of study. And if you were very lucky in 5 years, certainly you probably want to think about it in 10 years. So doing those kind of things, and then conducting a code audit, a zoning code audit, to make sure that your zoning regulations are aligned with the city goals and policies, so that you don't have code barriers. That is the kind of thing that you can apply to the city, state for grants for, with the Department of Land Conservation and Development.
Like a lot of work for the planners.
You don't want them to get bored. You don't want the planning commission to get bored.
He doesn't care anymore.
No, he wants them to be really busy.
Jacob had
a lot of
code when he started this.
I know.
I was gonna say at the beginning of this project.
He's got a couple left.
Couple.
We worked on lots of code modifications over the years.
Certainly, and I know that you've modernized your housing code as well. So there's probably some opportunities. I'm sure Jacob and Jenny have some ideas about your commercial and industrial code.
So I've got a question and it's not exactly here and it may be later.
That's fine.
Ask it and then I'll. In looking at trying to attract the businesses and everything else, one of the things I've heard from people. Business people in Portland looking at different things is our lack of. Medical care, hospital, and then also education being somewhat bleak, and I'm not trying to get into everything that's going on right now with the school district, but just in general, is having a bad, I guess, reputation, whether deserved or not. Does that come into play in looking at this and working into some of the different avenues and plans for possibly?
I don't think we talked about medical services. We certainly didn't talk about school services. And I think I don't know, I would defer to staff certainly and defer to you all about whether schools should be discussed in here at this point or not, in part because we're looking at city functions rather than school district functions. So I think it's the coordination with the school district that you need to do, of course. And I'm not sure beyond that where the boundary should be.
Are you thinking about like higher education?
No, just, I mean, when companies are looking for places to locate, two of the, things that they really look at are, what's if we're bringing in however many employees it is, we're gonna do that, what's the education system like in the area? And I agree, we're not school board, we're separate from that, but it's still something that I feel like we have to at least be, understanding and cognizant of and looking at. And the same thing with healthcare. They know that their employees are gonna be looking at it and making decisions that way.
What kind of school system a family wants their children to go to?
I agree wholeheartedly on what you're saying. I would echo that.
I think it could include amenities too, as part of the park system, looking at that.
I mean, that comes into it all. That's why I said that our natural resources are a huge plus for us. Two of the minuses are our education system, the reputation of it, and the lack of healthcare.
I said several things, remote workers and everything.
Exactly.
People make their decision.
So I would say your parks should be in your parks planning. And so I assume that you have a parks plan.
Yep.
Separate. I think that pretty clearly belongs there. We haven't mentioned medical services.
Mention it in the. Yeah.
In terms of, specific actions around medical services.
It's, as far as hiring, right? As far as businesses, attracting businesses. So the hospital that was set to go here, we were actually shot down by the big hospitals, basically, that said, no, don't let St. Helens have a hospital. We've got 5 of us out here. It's all about revenue, right? To speak bluntly, but it's all about revenue. We don't want that revenue going away. And that's why the hospital basically got shot down out here. And you cannot build a hospital. You cannot build a hospital because the politics involved.
I thought it had something to do with the fact that we were so close, we were located so close to Portland that it wasn't.
We're located so close to Portland that 5 hospitals didn't want that revenue taken away from them. And the politics allowed them to say no to whoever the powers are be at the state, say no, St. Helens can't have a hospital. And we had a hospital at one time. And it still got shot down. And that's why all the money got refunded, all the work was done out there, ready to go. And the city inherited the property to the county.
And so your EOA does talk about healthcare, like nursing and residential care facilities, as well as broadly other healthcare services as a target industry. And we talk about here, without naming all the different target industries, we do talk about healthcare and other target industries somewhat. We don't have actions specifically around them. So I would ask the question of, in terms of healthcare, are you looking for an action around increasing health services in St. Helens, or are you looking for some broader acknowledgement of the importance of healthcare?
I'm wondering if this should be, if given the purposes of what we're talking about here, it makes more sense to conceive of the healthcare question, the educational question, and others as subsets of a broader, how do we attract workers slash certain targeted employment opportunities matter? Because we're not talking about, there are some communities in the United States who prioritize healthcare because they're focusing on like retirees, for example. And that's not what I think we're talking about here. We're talking about it being easier to attract remote workers, easier to attract businesses that are planning to need to staff up if we can assure people of a certain degree of amenities in the community, including healthcare.
Yes,
So,
exactly right.
so David, we've got an action under the first goal of develop programs that attract businesses and identify target industries, considering tax incentives, land use control, and capital improvement programming. Consider targeting incentives in urban renewal areas, because we've got funding. We could have an action that we don't have in here that is essentially, it's developing a really specific type of economic development strategy. This is sort of more of a land use-y economic development strategy, but we could have an action that's about developing a strategy specific for the types of businesses, industries that are lacking in St. Helens. And I would say that would, really depend on you having staff capacity to do that kind of thing. We don't have that kind of action in here, I don't think, at this point. Are you looking at me in confusion, Jacob?
No, I'm just, my default expression
Okay,
is.
that's fine.
is friendly.
No, that's fine. So if we want an action like that, we can certainly add something like that.
One thing I'd say is that the hospitals in Portland area are hurting. They're all merging, they're trying to survive. So it'd be a hard sell to make a hospital here with if the big guys can't make it. And a little guy do, a little hospital. So anyway, it's a tough market now, hospital.
And I don't think I would necessarily specify hospitals in this kind of action, but an economic development strategy specific to attracting your target industries and services to provide a high quality of life, such as
Employment amenities, but how do you say employment amenities?
These are all like livability issues, right? Like having a hospital, having good schools, they're all.
I
part
think
of
the
that
best we're gonna
package.
get is urgent care. I hate to say it.
So for years and years, the business folks at Business Oregon, attracting business to the state would say it's location, utilities, and livability doesn't matter. They don't care. And Joe Miles.
Clear at them.
Yeah, and that doesn't make any sense. And it livability does matter. And education, schools, healthcare, that all matters. And just over the last few years, I'm starting there walking that back and saying, yes, livability does matter. And we know it does. Businesses aren't going to locate and bring their families and the workers' families if they don't have the services that they need. Social and that sustainability thing where you have the economic, social environment.
The one thing that we do have going for us education wise is the OMEC and the specific training that it provides to certain areas that could be utilized for businesses. Because it is very underutilized. A small, very, very small percent of locals use that. It's mainly people from outside the area that use OMEC.
And we talk about OMIC a little bit later.
Yep.
And PCC. So is there interest in adding that kind of action about developing that kind of strategy for targeted types of businesses, including business amenities like healthcare? that St. Helens lacks.
It seems like the job of the community development specialist would have to include that.
It seems like it would. That's part of what I was trying to say. Okay, so I'm gonna take us on. So then hitting the issue of the school district. I don't know what to say about that one. I've been following the news. I have a little bit of a sense. I don't live here. I don't know a lot. Is there a city role in that? And I'm gonna look at you, John. And
So we've had a longstanding good relationship with this.
Mhm.
Took a lot of us by surprise, and it's really unfortunate, and it's really dragging us, our image to the outside world down. A lot. And
Yeah.
and we need to heal and grow and back on track.
I'm not sure that right now is the time for a city initiative around that, but I don't know.
And I guess the only thing that I'd say about that is from what I understand, again, talking with people from a lot of different areas around Portland, is that the school district didn't have a great reputation before all this came up in terms of its how good of a school system it is. We're not talking about any of the, salacious stuff that we've got out there now. And again, I know it's not the city's issue, but it's, when we're talking about economic opportunities. To me, that does still come up as something that we have to at least be keep in our back mind and do what we can to help her.
Yeah,
I don't know how exactly, but
Capucci's had a better reputation, see what they do.
yeah, they do. actually.
So I don't
That's how.
hear a specific action to add to this. I think it's
Question.
part of the discussion, so. All right, I'm gonna go on, and if we want to come back to schools, we can. Did I get your points there? I don't remember if you had a third one.
I might have, but
But I just think there is, for the school, I just want to speak a little bit on, it is a heartache what's happening out there. But on the positive side, they have passed 2 different or 3 different bonds, and the voters have approved them,
Mhm.
showing support for our schools. So now, looks like leadership's getting looked at, which is a really good thing. Well, it will be. There's a lot of people involved. That they have an opportunity, we have an opportunity to have one of the best schools in the state. And the state is what mandates all the monitoring on whether whether a school passes or fails. So, to some extent, on that piece, not what's going on right now, the state has failed us, and the governor has made a pledge. So her main things are housing, affordable housing, mental health, homelessness, and education. Those are her keys. She is willing to step up and address those, so she's been there a short time. I think she's very good at policy and respect her for what she's done so far. So maybe this is a wake-up call for St. Helens, and she's definitely, we got a letter sent to us right away to the St. Helens community. And it was addressed to the school board, though, not to, even though we as elected officials got it, it was clearly that you were gonna do this, or I'm stepping in, so. Go ahead.
Beth, just a question. So a few years back, the Port of St. Helens was looking at bringing a trade school.
Mhm.
And it was unsuccessful, but one thing that we realized in that conversation was, our zoning isn't necessarily friendly to schools everywhere. And I wonder if that would be a component of the code audit.
Well, that's an interesting question. What was the issue?
The issue is the location they wanted to, that they were talking about putting it at didn't allow schools.
Mm-hmm,
It was on industrial property,
mm-hmm.
but, you know, schools may not provide a tax base, which, you know, is our lifeblood. And so it's kind of that interesting discussion of having that.
Is that the other community college?
It was a tech school, like electric,
Yes.
one up by Yakima.
Yes.
I can't remember what it's called.
What it was.
Yeah, I think if we made our zoning friendlier to schools, we're not just gonna get a surplus of schools being built that takes away our tax base. So I think the fear around that isn't really something I'm scared of.
So maybe we have, you know, an action below the zoning audit action that is essentially as part of the code audit, identify barriers to development of, you want to call it something other than school?
Facilities,
Sure, that might help.
Health and education,
oh, health and it, yeah, that's a good.
since that's kind of that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think we could say health and education. We could say something like, if you want to be kind of bureaucratic voiced around it, you could say something like human infrastructure, because that's what we're really talking about, right? Is building up the capacity to have healthy humans, which attracts people to the community. Whether that's healthy in mind or healthy in body or healthy for children in terms of their future prospects.
I would keep it less academic so that people know that we're talking about healthcare and education facilities. Well, I'm super academic, so you know, but I'm forever saying to my my folks that I work with, let's make it so that normal people know what we're talking about.
No, I think that's a good plan. I was concerned that you wanted to go in the other direction. But yeah, I think making
no.
it clear to everyone is a good way to go.
I like human infrastructure. I like it.
I mean, you know, that's the kind of language we use internally, but you know, I'm not sure that you're a normal person, so you've been mayor for too long.
Yeah, it's got to make sense to the electeds.
All right, so we'll work that in under the actions under goal B after the code audit. So it's a specific specific ask as part of that. So, okay. Anything else in A or B? Otherwise, we'll go on to C, which is about retaining and attracting industrial development that diversifies the city's economic base and supports higher wage jobs. And so what we're doing here with the policies, there's not a ton of policies there, is we're trying to set up the idea that some of your land in industrial land is prime industrial land. So it's hard to replace, and that's land, say, in your industrial park. And some of the land that you have that's zoned industrial, and perhaps light industrial, is not necessarily prime. Maybe some of that land would be appropriate to rezone or to change the allowed uses on to allow a wider range of uses. So this gets to, you know, maybe removing some of the barriers to development of things like those kind of schools or medical facilities. So the idea is protect your better industrial land. And I would say, you know, we've got a definition here from the state of what prime industrial land is. You don't have to use the state's definition, but I wanted to give you a starting place. It possesses site characteristics that are difficult or impossible to replicate within your city. And it has access to transportation and freight infrastructure. And I would say there's also an idea of size. In other words, you know, little tiny sites are much more common than bigger sites. So, you know, your point there about the battery facility and not being able to find a, you know, 4 or 5 or 600 acre site in Oregon to do that, it's because we just don't have those kind of things. So like a 50 acre site, I think, you know, if it's got the right infrastructure to it, and it's got the right ownership, like public ownership's great, where the city wants to develop it, then that's potentially prime industrial land. So don't give away your really good industrial land to get a strip mall. But maybe some of your light industrial land and Jacob and Jenny, you guys often talk about land in the specific places, sort of around the edges that maybe you could name a place or two. Maybe you couldn't also, because I'm asking you right off the top of your head. But that
CMH.
might be better for, you know, a wider range of uses.
Yeah, Gable Road's a classic case because a lot of that was industrial and it's slowly transformed to commercial over the years.
Right. And especially if it's anywhere near or particularly near residential development, that's going to become less attractive for industrial. And you want to protect your industrial some from residential encroachment. So that's the point of doing that.
We've had pushback on that.
Yes, you do. Everybody wants to see land develop sooner. The advantage.
They don't want to lose the light to industrial.
Oh, all right. Well, that's.
No, we have a lot of it.
I mean, you know, I think this is a public conversation. And so, you know, the way you do this ends up being through the planning commission. Like you've done many other things, and maybe it's not something St. Helens should do. You're not obligated to do it. But maybe it's an important conversation to have in some situations.
It's the right thing to do, but we get pushback.
Mhm. Are there any comments here? And, you know, part of here, what we're talking about is a lot of partnering with the port, with the Columbia Economic Team, with OMIC, OMIC R&D, that kind of thing, and looking at those opportunities for building up your industrial capacity. And when people are ready to go on to goal D, I can't tell if they're looking at goal C or D. Any other comments on anything under goal C? Okay, so in goal D, foster small growth and small business growth and entrepreneurship. The policies are pretty, you know, simple. We want those things to happen. They're, you know, the backbone of a city, especially like St. Helens growth. So the actions are the policies are pretty simple. The actions, again, are about partnering, let's see, developing strategy and materials about the way that the city can help businesses, with a focus on the value that the city can provide to support businesses. So these are things like webpage materials, that kind of thing, handouts, that kind of thing. Look at opportunities to partner with organizations to incentivize property owners to invest in their properties and encourage them to lease out. Some of that's in response to the way that some of your buildings are being used in a less active businesses. I keep hearing complaints about.
It was a long.
More potential.
That was a very delicate way to put that.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say people were complaining about, you know, attorneys or that kind of thing on ground floors. Well, as an economics consultant, I'm on a third floor. So how can you get, you know, more pedestrian activity in your commercial areas?
We talked about consolidating all the attorneys down here into one spot, so you could open up storefronts and.
You know, agglomerative economies, you know, if all the attorneys are together, you know.
You could share costs, it's more economic friendly, yeah.
Exactly. And then looking at continuing to coordinate and partner with organizations that provide workforce development. That is, you know, we could broaden that one out to talk about organizations that provide workforce development or K-12 education. That way we get the idea of your K-12 education in here in a sort of soft way.
Yeah, I'm gonna come out not in defense of attorneys or, you know. One of our issues isn't so much that we have the, professional offices like that here, is that we've got a lot of empty.
Yes.
storefronts.
And
Yes.
well, this
That's
is
the
really
biggest
about
issue, so
That's
the
part of
empty
it.
That's how
storefronts.
we address that.
I hit
that
on
one
that
from the
more than
bottom.
I've hit on getting rid of killing attorneys.
I just thought the attorneys was funny that people were picking on that. I hadn't heard that in many other communities.
So.
We are an easy target.
Well, like I said, as a consultant, same boat. But business services, professional services is really important. And it is something that can be a little footloose and fancy free. And I live in Eugene, all my coworkers are in Portland. So that's the kind of thing that you can also attract as remote workers. So any comments on the actions of the policies about fostering small business growth and entrepreneurship? I'm just amazed that we spell entrepreneurship right. I never do.
No, I mean, I guess the one thing I'd harken or relate it back to is something that was talked about a little bit earlier. Again, the making it easier for some of the small businesses, entrepreneurship, making it easier for them to get through the process with the city. And I'm not saying that blaming the city or anything else, but it is, people get really confused coming into it. And going through that process.
I certainly agree. That's some of what the feedback we heard. That would be, I think, a focus of your new staff person. It would tie into what we talked about under goal A. And then also under goal D, we've got about development of materials, about the ways that the city can support businesses, help businesses. And so I think that would come in there also. All right, so if there's no comments there, then goal F is about fostering vibrant commercial zones with a mixture of retail and service options that serve the needs of residents.
Will E?
Goal E, I did that, I think, last time too. I can't tell my E's from my F's. I'm gonna lose it still. That serve the needs of residents and enhance destination appeal. So this is getting at the fact that things like your restaurants, that kind of thing, your river amenities, all of that. It's great for businesses, but residents love those kind of things too. Who doesn't want a lovely wine tasting room in their community? Me, because I don't drink wine, but I love it for other people. So who doesn't want, rental of kayaks or whatnot? So this is the policies here are all about that. So I will stop talking and let you read through those policies and those actions. So one of the, I think, important things that we got in here is not just focusing on the Riverfront Business District, but also the Holton Business District also, because they're both important and they both need things like wayfinding action.
And I think ideally, acknowledging this would take some time, but ideally, and this is pointed to in your outline, is effectively connecting those two districts. I think that it would be lovely to exist in a world where we've got a walkable, navigable pathway between Holton and the riverfront. So that, for example, when we have people coming in, whether it's as tourists or whether it's as locals, they park somewhere and then they are on foot passing all these businesses, passing restaurants, etc. And I think it would also alleviate some of the feelings that one district or the other is receiving more attention or getting left behind.
And so the first action there is about enhancing and better connecting the riverfront and Holton business districts through improved transportation links and wayfinding. And then one of the later actions there is developing a parking management strategy for the Riverfront District. So I think we've captured those two ideas there. And I think wayfinding is really important for people driving through, honestly, as well as for people walking along.
We're getting Apple and Google Maps to make the correct directions.
I think that's probably very hard.
I was curious about that. You know, is there a successful strategy for getting them to recommend that people go through, you know, the main Hulton corridor rather than the algorithm sending them down Old Portland Road because it's, you know, faster?
I do not know, and I'm going to say that I suspect not. I'm thinking about what happened a few weeks ago where a whole bunch of cars got stuck someplace in Oregon that was really weird because Apple Maps sent them down, I don't know, a gravel road that was covered in snow or something like that. And I'm also thinking about the fact that, you know, people get lost and die in Death Valley every year because you know, Apple and Google Maps aren't good enough there. So I'm not sure that there's a good strategy for that, but
Teach them how to read a map in school.
well, yeah. That's a dying art. Oh, hey, look, we have work with mapping services to ensure proper routing through the Holton Business District. So I
Right,
guess
and that was my question is, I was just curious what that work with the mapping services looks like, because that would be really cool. I'm just not
Yeah,
sure what it means.
I'm not sure. I think it would probably be a staff person digging into that some.
Cool.
You, go into improved transportation links a little bit,
Are you talking about the
the actions on the first action.
so continue to implement the US 30 and Columbia Boulevard / St. Helens Street Corridor Master Plan and Riverfront Connector Plan? I think this is a staff question.
So
About that
I
more.
think the idea behind it is the corridor master plan has all of these special opportunity areas between Holton and the Riverfront District. And if these were implemented, for example, at the dead end of Columbia Boulevard and First Street, it's a large opportunity area. It's a beautiful view of the river. If these things were implemented, your walk from Holton, as David talked about earlier, would be more enjoyable. It's about a mile walk, but if you have these special opportunity areas along the way, you're more likely to enjoy that walk. So that's kind of what it's talking about, because there are sidewalks the entire way.
Which is rare,
What was that?
which is kind of rare.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking, I talked about with a number of folks here about, you know, a bus system that would do a figure eight that comes through the.
You're thinking of transit links.
Yeah. Well, this is improved transportation, link, so,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
you know, go down through the Holton Business District down to here, do a figure eight type of thing that would get the residents, you know, an opportunity to utilize it, our amenities a little better.
So, I mean, I'm not saying transit's impossible, but transit's expensive.
Yeah.
Is that something that we might want to add an action to explore the feasibility of it?
Well, we have CC Rider.
We have a transit
We have
provider.
transit, yes.
And I do think they have that route, but in a long time since I've looked into it, it's probably not free.
Failed bond in the past.
Yeah.
I think they're.
So do we want an action to work with them to improve that route?
I mean, if it was up for me, I'd say yes, but there's just one of numerous voices here. So.
I'm seeing some head shakes.
Well, I just, you know, I look at the way this world's going and I just, you know, this is all great and fine and dandy, but you know, I mean, people are Amazon this, Amazon that. Met Burger King yesterday, decided, or the day before, decided to sit there and eat my burger instead of taking it and running. I watched 4 different Ubers show up, pick up orders, to have people have it dropped at their doorstep.
Like,
So, I mean,
Awesome,
They have
isn't it?
chairs taped off at Warren Country Inn for DoorDash.
it's just amazing.
Up at
I
the
mean,
ball, yeah.
you know, and I see so many different Amazons, they're not even labeled right now because they're trying to keep up with capacity. They got the vest on, but they're renting vans to make deliveries. So, you know, this world's ever changing too. So,
I think what you're essentially asking is how much would that transit be used if people aren't willing
yeah,
to
exactly.
walk out their door
Yeah.
to go to Burger King?
Yes.
I think,
That also says, you know, that's, they're using transportation to get the burgers itself, so they might use the transportation, go to Burger King. If they didn't have to pay for Uber.
Yeah, if you can have the transit,
Well-
maybe transit needs to start delivering burgers.
Yeah, there
I
you
think
go.
he's talking about Uber delivery rather than Uber rides.
Yeah, that, I mean, it's the same thing, I think, as transportation.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a person, it's a burger, it's meat.
Of some
But
form.
I guess what I'm saying is, it used to be you had to you would take transit to go to Safeway if you didn't have a car, do your shopping. Nowadays, you can have them shop for you and deliver to your doorstep. Or when I gotta put on my clothes, I gotta pay a little bit of transit fee, hop on that bus, go there, do my shopping. Or I can pay 10 or 15 more dollars extra, or maybe even 20, it doesn't matter, because it's convenient. It's,
you have a resource of people coming to St. Helens.
yes.
And so it doesn't have to be necessarily CC Rider, but some type
I
of.
could see a
and maybe
seasonal,
It's a seasonal.
I
thing
could see a
that
seasonal.
Connects that so people can discover
That's it. I
Holton.
could see a
And then,
seasonal.
and you're getting bodies up there and, oh yeah, this place is interesting.
You're trying to
It
keep.
falls into tourism.
I could go for that.
Well, and that also might help us with the issue of people being routed down Old Portland to get to the riverfront rather than going through Holton. If we're seasonally running some sort of Holton riverfront loop connector, if the parking for that connector is up near the top of the Holton district or somewhere over there, then that gives people a reason to not just cut down Old Portland and end up in the riverfront.
So how about we add an action about seasonal transit or tram that connects the Holton and Riverfront district loops?
I think tourism's definitely a part of it because you see
Yes.
many people that come here for Halloween Town and then they have
And
a way to get back to Portland or wherever they're going.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think that
even
was talked about in there.
on a weekly basis, you see people asking for rides to get to the airport, or I have a doctor's appointment in Portland. Is there anybody that can take me to Portland? So I think transportation is an issue.
Yeah. And it could be utilizing the train service.
And-
Yes.
I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you as far as people knowing that there's a town here. I will tell visitors from outside the area, and I think I shared this in our meeting too, that want to go fish that aren't from here. I say, come down, go to Columbia Boulevard, take a right, come down a mile. Then you're gonna see a big brick courthouse behind it. I'll pick you up on that dock. And they got this huge smile on their face. They've been through St. Helens 100 times on the highway. Never knew the whole town existed. They're like, wow.
So
Yep.
so that brings us to our actual goal F. Tourism as a key economic driver.
A little bit.
So about promoting year-round tourism, ensuring your transient lodging tax spending aligns with the city's broader economic development goals and tourism goals. And then integrate recreational opportunities into the riverfront district, creating public spaces that promote access to and enjoyment of the Columbia River. And so these are then a series of actions to get at that. And then, the tram that we just talked about might well belong as well in these actions rather than in the goal E actions. And so these actions are essentially about tourism, obviously, and how to get more year-round tourism, that kind of thing.
Initially, one thing that I thought maybe was missing is just recognizing the fact that our downtown is kind of unique in that the majority of our downtown is a historic district. It touches on that on the very last point, heritage tourism, but I think even beyond tourism, there's people that choose to live in communities because of its historic character, or they want to live in a historic home rather than a cookie cutter house in a development, or establish a business in a historic building.
So maybe this is a policy, recognize and capitalize on.
In the meetings, and that was one of the reasons that they included heritage tourism, and I think in the meeting you asked me what heritage tourism was, so I looked at that definition, I brought it with me. And it's the National Trust defines heritage tourism as traveling to experience the places, artifacts, activities that authentically represent the stories and people of the past. A huge opportunity. One of the examples of heritage tourism is the walking tour that we have, and I had the curator of the museum give me figures today. The Queenstown walking tour, which is heritage tourism, has had 522,000 visits, over 522,000 visits. And the historic walking district, really what the key of it is, we have a walking tour and it's had over 96,000 visits.
Wow. That's awesome.
What time frame?
Since the inception, right?
Yeah, probably the last 5 years, maybe.
So, heritage tourism is really important.
So we call out developing a heritage tourism strategy.
People, they don't tend to, if they're involved in heritage tourism, they don't tend to stay with family. They're not going to stay with family they necessarily. So they go, they spend money in lodging, they stay longer, they shop for antiques, they, do all those things that creates jobs.
I know it's a little, late in the game, but aren't we coming out to 175? St. Helens here, 175 years.
Established 18.
Brandon, what's the anniversary next year?
18 what?
That's just the countries that we were talking about.
200.
I mean, 75, 25, isn't that 175 for
We were founded in 1889, right?
1850?
1889?
1889 is when it was incorporated, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it depends on whether you go back to 1845 when it was Plymouth.
So I think what you're getting at is essentially if there's a key milestone, like a big
Yes.
birthday.
Yeah.
And I would look to you guys to define if that's the case.
Added into this summer and tourism opportunities through initiatives. I mean, you could have something in there about
We can blow stuff up. Oh, man.
or a milestone or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, the heritage tourism, then the biggest months for it are June, July, and August are the biggest months. for
Right.
heritage.
Well, and that's what this is trying to say is like we've got a great fall.
Yeah,
and
let's
you
do
have
something other
options.
times, bring
Let's
people
do
here.
stuff in the spring and summer.
Well, and I think there is a through line here connecting the heritage tourism and things like Halloween Town or the Twilight films, which is, even though some of those were the more recent pop culture past, those are opportunities that nowhere else can provide because nowhere else had that done here, whether it's our history from the early 1900s or whether it's our film history more recently. So I think we tend to think of those, I think, a little separately sometimes, but I think they really are part of the same tourism narrative force. And maybe there are ways we can identify other sort of unique stories that could be built into events and opportunities.
So I think that might work into the work with the tourism consultant to develop a comprehensive tourism strategy, blah, blah, blah. Building on
Beyond
St.
Holiday
Helens. Building on St. Helens' unique history.
Which we're doing some of that in the Riverfront District
Yes.
signage. How many signs are gonna be that you coordinated with
Wayfinding signs or interpretive?
interpretive signs?
Quite a few.
Including the river walk,
The
maybe 5.
That's part of it. So
Yeah.
it's a good start.
But we have a strategy for the rest too. I mean, there's ample content to cover. Yeah.
the whole,
Phase 2.
yes, and 3, there's viewpoint and
So I've got the idea of, working on that set of stories, building on St. Helens unique history. And then looking at milestone historical events and celebrate them. That sounds like fun. Are there other pieces that are missing here?
Hotels,
We got a
infrastructure.
hotel, we got a boutique hotel in here.
Still short, very short. Accommodation. Especially during Halloween time.
Do we want to say we've got partner with the developer of a boutique hotel on the city-owned riverfront site? Do we want to say and identify other opportunities for accommodations?
I don't think so. But I'm just one voice here again. Like Brad was saying that people go to Astoria and stay in stories in Halloween Town.
Well, years ago, I went to a class that the tourism had done that was about Airbnb.
Airbnb, super.
Yeah, to learn how to do Airbnbs. They brought in a super host and then they taught people how to do Airbnbs. That was like in the infancy of it. It seemed like it was quite a while ago.
Communities are trying to regulate those away and we were trying to attract.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if we incentivize that somehow again to, but.
Pretty easy going regulation process. It's already kind of low barrier to entry. I don't know how we could make it easier, honestly.
Know that
You want
as
to?
as a person who looks at housing and housing problems, I would be careful with that one. I wouldn't like to see your housing rental market turn that strongly. I mean, Airbnb and short-term rentals is in fact an important piece of economic development strategy for tourism. But you don't want that, problem in states. Better to see, hotels and that kind of thing, so that people who work here have the opportunity to rent here as well. So I just be a little careful.
Just want people to stay in town instead of leaving town because there's no place to stay.
Yeah.
It's an interim solution to that.
Spend money.
I'd like
Went
to,
our wine tasting shop, talking to people doing it, they're staying over in Kelso and in other locations. But they're here to be seeing St. Helens.
Yep.
And we should get advantage of their lodging expenses too.
this is switching gears, but I was approached years ago about that issue we were talking about between Holton and Riverfront District. It's a mile and a half. That micro trip is really achieved well with things like e-bikes or bicycles or scooters or e-scooters. And someone was asking me if St. Helens has ever considered a bike share program. And I said, I don't know if we have the mass of users for that, but I feel like as the Riverwalk gets built, you might see people with bikes more easily getting to Holton and the Riverfront District. That connection could be made a little bit easier on bike. It's not great for people with disabilities, but it does provide people who can walk or bike that access. So I don't know if that's opening up a can of worms, because a bike share program is a pretty big lift, and then you have to worry about straight bikes everywhere, and it's just, those can be really difficult. But I think if it was managed well, I think a program like that would help with that connection between the two districts.
We don't allow bikes in the parks, so maybe we want to modify that to encourage that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly wide enough to accommodate. We thought about people with strollers, we thought about two-way travel.
Well,
But-
Barlow might have some, input on that too.
Did you say Portland?
Oh.
Sure. Yeah,
Just stay away from those darn scooters
yeah.
trying to kill people.
The liability on that. Everybody involved would be, is huge.
Yeah, I think it would have to be a third party, but this, and we wouldn't have to solve it here in this meeting tonight, but it might just be like explore opportunities for bike share or
We
scooter.
discuss that in the meeting, but more in an entrepreneurial kind of way where we don't have anybody here that rents bikes
Yeah.
or rents
Kayaks.
kayaks.
Yeah.
That was talked about,
Yeah.
yes.
Maybe it could be wide enough to cover that. As just, a place that rents bikes.
Yep, that was exactly what, you're right.
Maybe the city's position is more providing pop-up space for that, or somehow providing space instead of actually providing some fishing guides or any of that stuff.
Also, the infrastructure to accommodate those things. Rent a bike, but you can't ride it anywhere, so you have to make sure that there's good bike lanes and bike trails.
That was
but it also, it's not managed right, it is really unpleasurable for people that are actually walking and stuff. Like that. So
Yeah. That's why I was like careful to bring it up too, because it's like, you do really want to open a can of worms, but I could just see it solving that Holton Riverfront District problem.
And it would be nice to have some type of incentive or not incentive, something that would attract people in between the space,
Yeah.
between the two
There's an
spots.
infrastructure.
And to add that to that bullet point that starts investigate opportunities to grow sport fishing, windsurfing.
Sure. Or we could have it as a, I've sort of written it a little bit as a separate item.
Sports.
Right below that. Because I think a bike share is fundamentally different than the water sports.
Yeah, and I thought we had kind of covered that. Wasn't it Philip who brought it up? That brought it up, the amenities about the kayaks and maybe even bikes for boaters to get off and be able to go up to Sunshine Pizza.
Yeah. We've got investigate opportunities to grow sports fishing and windsurfing activities, including development of necessary onshore and in-water amenities.
Yes.
As well as supporting recreational uses on the water, support businesses in the Riverfront District that enhance recreational uses on the water.
Okay, so should we include the
Bike share idea?
bike share and also our urban trails?
Then you'd have to modify this third from the bottom, support development of multi-use trails or something.
Yeah, because we have an urban trail system that's been worked on extremely.
Trails or routes.
I hope Jerry's listening in right now.
I hope he is too. We
Well,
worked
it's
very hard on that.
It's broader than that. I think bike share and related infrastructure,
Yeah.
because then it
There you
folds
go.
into our transportation
Yes.
planning and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I think if it's in here too, that provides us opportunity for grant funding for specifically bike share, like there might be,
Sure.
it's good to have it listed as its own thing.
Yes. I have those kind of notes. So other things on this one? And then opening it up more widely. Are there things that are missing here in our actions or policies?
So one of the things, we went to the SDAP process back in 2014. Brought in these architects and engineers and including the Royce brains. We talked about this connection from the highway to downtown, whether that's on the Gable, whether it's on coming through the Holton District. And how the importance of creating these gateway features, right? I think we've captured that notion. But it was a barrier. Really. It's something that's, I noticed that in the EOA that it's not quite captured. Talks about the highway, it relates to.
So I think what
basically
you're
the
saying,
Portland market, but it doesn't talk internally at the city about it, this issue, the whole. Distance from the highway to the riverfront.
so I think that would be under the disadvantages.
It would. That was their recommendation was to create this kind of string of pearls kind of concept of, breadcrumbs, just as you get down, there's something interesting, keep going kind of notion. And I think that's missing in the EOA, and I think it's reasonably well covered in goals.
Yeah, it's sort of embodied in the corridor plan and riverfront connector plan. Because that kind of thing is something we were thinking about when we did those. Although it's not explicitly stated here.
But yeah, especially at the highway there, right at the chamber, that gateway point is crucial.
Okay, so we will work with y'all about getting that one right. Okay,
I think another gap that we have is during the winter, there's really no events, so people at downtown they don't really get a lot of customers. I mean, it's their slow season. We could find something, events down here. I was talking to Brandon the other day. Possibly.
Like Ghost Town?
Christmas
Oh.
town.
There you go. Easter town.
Did you heard that Spirit of Halloween Town? The stores are gonna do Spirit of Christmas now too.
so we could add, below the expand spring and summer tourism to expand winter tourism. Through opportunities or initiatives such as, do you guys really want me to say Christmas Town?
Any
ideas?
Yes,
I think just again, looking for unique
Can you,
things.
yes,
that-
can you put in parentheses, Dan Carey?
Well, we have a cute downtown that was Christmas seed up.
What I think is, is to, since we have maybe a wing of the county courthouse to ask the Permanent Art Museum if they have a traveling exhibit that can come in there and that, change periodically, that would drive people down there during the winter time.
It's all gonna be state court stuff.
Is it?
That's why the museum's moving over to
Okay.
John.
Is that not already covered in the tourism consultant to develop a comprehensive strategy that includes events and attractions for all seasons?
That's kind of neat.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I was gonna say that sounds very similar. It's a good idea, but
Detailed?
A little more emphasis on it, I think.
For winters.
For winter and just.
How about we expand spring, summer and winter tourism?
sure.
Well, then we've named,
Yeah.
winter. We should
You
obviously
can
have
pick up a park.
You say year round.
Oh, that's true.
Sure. We could say year round. That is shorter.
All season sounds really good now.
I just wanted to mention, Russ, I see that you're on. I don't know if you had anything. You came a little bit late. And we're kind of wrapping up. Did you have anything you wanted to add to as feedback?
No, I'm just listening. I think, I just taking it in.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure you can chime in if you had anything.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
All right.
So there are other items that we're missing. Other gaps. And then I'll go into the EOA in a moment. For anybody that has read it. Okay. So what you've heard here today, we'll come up with some edits to this and you'll see those reflected in the actions that come in front of you by hearings. And remember that it's not essential that we get the actions here perfect. You can always add actions. So that would go into the EOA and sort of become a living document, a living work plan for staff. And I'm willing to bet that at some point somebody has a good idea that should be added to that. There's nothing wrong with that. We need to get it good enough at this point that it reflects what we've heard. But that perfection isn't necessary. I imagine that as time goes by, this action plan would be modified. So I think I'm just trying to relieve any anxiety around that. Okay. All right. Then the economic opportunities analysis, our lovely, let's see, it's only 85 pages long. I don't know if anybody has read it. If you haven't read it and you read it, and you have typo sort of comments, please send them to Jacob and Jenny. There's nothing more boring than going through typos in this kind of meeting. And I know we don't have Saint apostrophe S Helens. We checked for that. We do have Saint Helens S apostrophe or apostrophe S, depending on which one we used. So I know we don't have that typo. But are there any substantive comments? And John, you may have comments because I know you read this recently.
Yeah, mostly was to disadvantages, incorporating that distance to Highway 30 from the riverfront.
Okay, well, we will get that in. Jenny or Jacob, can either of you remind me of when we're going to hearings? Because
Talked about that.
March,
That when the first one is, March?
I think so. I wrote it down on my,
Let me get back to you. I'm gonna double check before we. me something wrong.
Okay, so what I think I would ask is that, during your holidays, you guys read through this, because it'll be really good reading. So preferably in January, you go through this and you get any comments that you have to Jacob and Jenny. And we can make any corrections that are necessary. So whenever we have the first hearing, we need to notice the economic opportunity analysis 35 days ahead of it to the state. And this is what I would call substantially complete. Adding something like what John was talking about, that kind of addition or little changes, that's all fine. You can do that after the 35-day notice. If in hearings we come up on it and we figure out there's some, what I hope is minor issue, we can correct it, and we would correct it at that. So not worried about that kind of thing. I'm worried that you all are satisfied with it. So.
The first hearing is March 11th, and that will go before the planning commission, and then April 16th is the final adoption before city council. So there's ample time to read the document.
But we can't bring you comments that have been addressed if you tell us on April 10th.
Right, we don't want to wait till the last minute.
So I would ask for it by the end of
In
January.
those hearings, there'll be opportunity for public.
Yes, and that could always sway your comments too, if someone comes and testifies. Yep, absolutely, that's the purpose of the hearings.
Hardly anybody says anything about an EOA.
This is St. Helens.
St. Helens.
Never know.
I mean, I'm okay with it.
Bring your tap dancing shoes and.
We'll do what needs to be done. Yeah. That's all I had for you.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you all for your thoughts
Yeah.
and your input. It'll make a better document.
So I think we're on to our last item, right? Which is planning commission proactive items.
Just a boilerplate, so if there's nothing.
I think just we need some guidance now with new rules on meeting law. We can't do subcommittees. In my mind, it seems like then we're. Whether it's assigning. Research to different planning commissioners, they do it individually and then report back to the commission, or how we handle. We don't want the proactive items to just go away. So we'll work on those, but how do we?
And I wonder if this is an opportunity to enlighten Jennifer on what we're talking about.
Well, they're not new.
Just
'cause
the
they're-
proactive concept.
You could like.
So
You don't need to stay for this.
planning commissioner can, or I can. So a while back, the commission discussed about being proactive, meaning they actively take on certain things to supplement staff, because we can only do so much. And so we've added that to the planning commission agenda. And so there's standing items on each agenda, and there's three of them right now. There's the plaza to improve that accessibility, surface, stuff like that. Vacant storefronts, and was it architectural standards?
Standards.
And so those were the items, and the idea was the planning commission, when they have capacity, can independently look at that stuff, bring the ideas back to the table, and then help shape policy, whatever. And before we were educated on the latest and greatest, the idea was that there would be subcommittees that were composed of enough people that it wasn't a quorum, but they could at least have a couple minds bouncing off of each other and bring that to the table. Now we understand that's really not feasible. And so that's what she's getting at. That conversation has to take place in the public. And it becomes an encumbrance because any public meeting has to have Zoom minutes, all that stuff. And by default, we also have that on these joint meetings in case it's something to discuss. Obviously, something that the commission wants to look at, shouldn't be contrary to the council's goals. For example, if the commission was saying, well, we really need a nuclear power plant in the middle of the city, council's probably gonna frown upon that, and so it's probably not worth discussing. Now, all the things that are on there, the council has been receptive to it, and some of these meetings, we've really had some pretty thorough discussions. In this case, this meeting was largely reserved for this economic opportunities analysis thing. But if this wasn't here, it's very possible one of those proactive items would have a lot more conversation associated with it. So that's the background.
So how do we orchestrate this so that things still occur?
I think one of the ideas, before was maybe dedicate a certain time frame as a kind of a work session for the planning commission. We don't have any work session time. Like a half an hour of planning commission meetings. You know, we just wanted to do more. We were frustrated that we felt like we were only reactive and there was no planning in planning commission. So that we were only reacting to applications. So that's, you know, where it kind of started and
Well, there's
I
another.
think,
We could
I think
also
work
look at
sessions are,
the
ahead.
legislation that has been enacted since 74 to have them updated, so, you know, ask our local, senator and representative to, tell them what, we're up against here. They should be also up against it too, because they have the same laws applying to them.
So why can't they have work?
There's,
we could, we just haven't implemented that. I think we could, but
yeah,
it's
so
taking the time.
The subcommittee thing not being feasible independent of the public meeting was a recent revelation. And so it's like, oh crud. And I think now it's a matter of, okay, when we have a planning commission meeting that's lighter, for example, not like the one we had last night, that's an opportunity for the commission to discuss stuff like that. Assuming that it aligns with research that's been done, so they have something to bring to the table.
But that also gives us, it's kind of the last minute, because you won't know if it's light until a week before.
Yeah.
So you won't-
exactly. I think that's a pretty key issue. And I think, while I hesitate to suggest more time for all of us on the planning commission, because I know we're already having a hard time getting ourselves commissioned up staff wise. I think it might be more useful just to set a dedicated work session time. Like if we do planning commission meetings once a week, do work session meetings, or once a month, do work session
I'm gonna
meetings.
say, you guys are busy.
Yeah, we're not that cool.
And so the challenge then is additional meetings. We have a finite amount of capacity and how that affects us just dealing with the day-to-day stuff. And I don't know if we have a good answer, but that's one of the things that we've been juggling.
Because Lucia, it takes 3 staff. I mean, you have one that you're.
Oh, sure,
An
sure.
associated planner, you're gonna need.
We also had our
Yeah. Do we have a sense for how other communities are handling this problem?
last meeting yesterday.
I don't know if we've ever discussed that, David.
Yeah,
I think we decided with staffing issues that wasn't possible to do it as a separate session. I'm suggesting that maybe we do it within our sessions, but it's like we always look at the agenda, and if we have time at the end, it's, oh yeah, is there any planning, proactive items? And like last night is 10 o'clock and we're all tired and it's like.
Last night, there were 3 scheduled
Three
public
scheduled.
hearings, though. If you have one public hearing and one discussion item, the chances are it's probably gonna be a light meeting. If you have no public hearings, you can pretty much guarantee you're gonna have time to talk about proactive items. I mean, I don't know.
In the past, we've had no public hearings, we cancel the meeting.
Not always. Sometimes there's business that needs to be conducted. And it's kind of looking like January may not have any public hearings, but we have vice chair selection, we have new commissioner, we have other business.
Yeah,
So,
Sorry to,
Yeah.
I got too much coffee in me now. I wonder, because what you said, oh yeah, the light bulb went off. I wonder, because there's a certain point in time when we know we won't have a public hearing because of our notice requirements. And so if we have the impression of, hey, this may be a lighter meeting, we let you all know in advance. And And so then you have some, you're not caught off guard.
Right.
And so if, oh, okay, this might be an opportunity that may enable you to, whoever, to do the research and bring something to the table.
And I think you could go ahead and get some information as long as you go through Jacob. And then let's say I'm trying to think of how you can
You cannot
Speed this up.
disseminate from another.
speed this up. So just follow me.
Okay.
You're not talking amongst each other. You're using Jacob like a city administrator. You would say, I want to submit on vacant storefronts. I found out some information. I want this to go out in the agenda. And he can gather that information, put it together, allow you guys, the rest of you guys, because it goes out as public notice then. That this gives you a packet to study up. So let's say Dan Carey knew nothing. And you guys haven't talked, but you both came up with information that you gave to Jacob for this, that you just wanted to have as part of the discussion. Then Dan Carey can say, oh, this, and if he's not knowing, and you're going through Jacob, who's that you brought that, or you brought that, to this discussion. It's just, that's how you have to do it, is go through everything funnels through our city administrator. I do not call counselors, period. I don't. Do I?
No.
Do I? Okay, it goes through the city administrator, the agenda is set. And then, that's how you have to do it. That's ethically by law, how you have to do it.
Well, the item is on the agenda by default. And so I
Yes,
think it's just a matter if the case where we do notify you, hey,
well,
we think this is gonna be a light meeting, and if you wanna add materials, yeah, that's not.
and
The
then,
thing I was gonna suggest is instead of just putting on the agenda proactive items, it kind of goes along with maybe with what you were saying, Rick, is, don't put it down there just as proactive items. Say, okay, this time we're gonna address the plaza.
exactly, what's the
This
meat
time,
behind it?
we've got some information that's come in, knowing it, and we're gonna address, we're gonna talk about vacant storefronts. And then put that on the agenda and.
We had a really good discussion
have
about that,
specific-
vacant storefronts. We had a really good discussion because people have brought a lot of stuff to the table.
I think there needs to be some delegation of who's gonna do the research to bring to it.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe you can do that at January meeting when you have your new commissioner.
Brendan told me an idea about, I think he talked with John about hiring a dedicated secretary for all meetings. That could be utilized.
Who would pay for that?
I
Yeah,
don't know.
That's great.
No, but it's an idea,
No, I'm not.
It's-
so it could
we've already,
have meetings outside of our regular scheduled meetings.
I'll just say, I mean, that's up to the new council, but, I can tell you right now, with the amount of, public records requests, our two recorders can't even keep up with the minutes we have. We've already hired that out. So, I mean, that's a huge cost. Also, public records requests have to go through attorneys to make sure that the information can be, I mean, huge. So,
Hey, so that's not a short-term. solution.
yes, yeah. That's what I'm trying to say.
Just so I understand the rules on it, and we have new leadership within the city council, there'll be new leadership. Planning commission and vote and the mayor and chair of the planning commission meet and set some strategies.
That, you have to be very careful because we are above you, and if we have quasi judicial
That's why.
discussions, that is, no, I would not though.
When that happened within a joint meeting. then.
Within a joint meeting, I think it could because it's open discussion. Yes.
You guys who led, there was some committees, like, the date, how often does that happen?
Twice, it was during HB 3115, otherwise there's been.
And there was never a quorum.
But
Even
even
the
the,
only one that really met as a subcommittee.
Yeah, nothing else has happened.
Mostly subcommittee one, but.
Parks Commission used to utilize subcommittees though too. They would have the Urban Trail Subcommittee, and so they had a dedicated group that would get together and go on field trips and work on that, and so. I think a lot of our commissions have utilized subcommittees.
But that was before the realization of those
Right.
having to be, having that public presence.
So
I think the opportunity is, we're at the end of our 2-year strategic plan. So we're on the eve of a new strategic plan effort.
That's a good
And
point.
that's probably an opportunity to discuss priorities and, you know, how is that folded into that?
This committee is.
All committees, I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be nice if we all.
So in
I-
the
I-
new regulations, there is a specific exemption for, to discuss administrative, you know, what time's the meeting, or here's some information.
Informational, that's all.
Yeah, it's just information going to the point of contact, either me or the department, or the, you know, division head that needs that information to organize the meeting for agenda materials, that kind of thing, so. Don't feel like you're out of bounds communicating completely. It's just when you start talking to each other, then that you start getting dangerous.
I also wonder about, you know, if this, you know, actually impinges upon, you know, our constitutional rights like First Amendment to actually gather together and that type of stuff. Cause I don't think you can really legislate, you know, that those rights away.
No, you're perfectly fine. Even if you're not talking business, and there is a quorum, you don't hang out together, but you're not talking business. Perception, no, perception,
Yes.
but no, you're not against the rule. If you're not talking business. You're not.
And it's also what is business do. I'd like, you know. Sometimes I'd like to speak with Jennifer about livability if it's a big city, but that's,
That has to go.
well, it might not be on any agenda or anything like that. It just, you know,
Okay.
the dreams of, you know, look at the possibilities. But I mean, it's very difficult to actually, you know, really work on these things.
What amazes me is how,
Separate.
what amazes me is if the House representatives and the senators, if they honor the same thing the
Yeah.
cities and counties have to go to, there's no way, because how do they get stuff done? Absolutely no way.
think
I
they must
suspect the
do sense
difference
of
is that
themselves.
it's not the same kind of decision-making body. Like we are executive, they're legislative, and I think it's a different rule set.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not an attorney, but you're probably right.
Now, I'll note they're the folks that made those rules. So if it's a
I
different rule
know.
set, there might be a
know,
reason.
and send it down the pipe.
You guys deal with it.
We think we get I don't remember what we did last time. We were proposing that our meeting start at 6:30 instead of 6, and
That was what's adopted in the public meeting schedule. Yeah.
January.
Yeah, I was frustrated because it was for Ginny and then Ginny resigned.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we can change it.
If anyone wants to talk about changing it at the next meeting, I just thought with all the vacancies and new planning commissioners, let's just leave it how it is and then have a conversation when we have a full body again.
With realizing the meeting laws that came up last night, we need to do some work on resolution 1648, which talks about the rules for planning commissioners and committees.
Yeah.
And also there's no provision in the rules about family members being on the commission, which has come up. I personally don't think it's appropriate for family members to be on the committee together. I don't know how you ever regulate whether they may decided something at home before they're both reviewing the same material, and can't assume that they didn't talk about it at home, so the perception there is. So, and there's nothing, no provision for that.
Yeah, that's,
Safer way to go. Safer way to go.
I think Jacob brought a good point, though. They get the goal settings coming up for the council. And that would be a good time to maybe even throw some of these on a queue every 2 years that it comes up. Council's just part of the policy of every 2 years. Might be a good time to show up and maybe even go through the SWAT with Rachel. I don't know. That's something you're already doing some of that. It's an idea.
Something too, if maybe John, you and Kathy could look into, I know the Parks Commission brought it up and I noticed in your meeting you had this issue too, but we'd been working off of, I think, a 2019 resolution about interview committees for commissions. And the Parks Commission, they always had a committee of 2 or 3 that would meet with the people individually and interview them and then come back to the commission and make a recommendation. And apparently that's something that needs to be reworked too, so.
It was very awkward last night.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had to just stop doing that, so.
That's, yeah, I think it was 2019, that last one was.
I think it's 13,
Is
because I was just looking at it yesterday.
So yeah, that's something we need to work on.
The thing I was concerned about last night was because I had a couple prepared questions from what I've been on the committee before. But my understanding was and we only did have one candidate, but you have to ask the same question of every candidate. And that wouldn't have happened last night because we were just throwing, it was the first time we did it. People were just throwing out.
I provided that,
You did.
that question list. I don't, did you have that paper?
Yeah, I had it.
I'll bring my whip next time.
Checked on it and tried to hit some of those. Yeah, we didn't. So they hit
I
all
had
of
one of those questions asked. I'll give Jennifer props. She did ask one of those questions.
No, actually, I checked off 5 or 6. We actually did. I know I did.
You changed the wording a little bit.
Yes, we did change the word.
Yeah,
We're gonna get sued.
it makes it a lot longer and, you wish you could ask some questions because I've been through the interview process lots of times, but the one thing you guys did mention last night too is you don't have to accept the applicant still. You can always just go right back out, put it back out. So
Yeah, it is awkward voting in front of the candidate.
it is very time consuming. A lot more time involved.
Right? You guys
It used to be
decided
like that, and
in
then,
front of everybody and.
which, again, it's kind of uncomfortable talking about somebody's strengths and weaknesses right in front of them.
Yeah,
And then talking about, oh, who should it be?
and you can't really ask them to leave because it's a public meeting. It's, yeah.
It would be nice to know how other cities do it, what's working well and what's.
And I think this revelation, because that state body who relooked at these rules and go, hey, this is how this is supposed to happen. I'm suspecting a lot of jurisdictions are like, oh, God, this is a new thing.
Back in the old days, 15 years ago, when I applied, I sent the application in and they were just gonna get back to me.
Like on the good old days.
They were just gonna get back to me and they were talking about it. I showed up. I was the only audience member. And they said, let's talk. Well, I said, I'm right here. You can interview me now. And there was no interview set up. So they interviewed me right then.
Yes.
Well, given that it sounds like this really is coming from a new interpretation from the state, I'm wondering, I don't know what the name of it is, but I'm sure we've got some sort of, small city or multi-county trade organization in Oregon. I'm wondering if if other communities are having this problem, maybe that org approaches the legislature and asks them to amend the law to accommodate doing things like this.
To update it.
Yeah.
Too, OGEC seemed to be pretty excited about doing trainings and
Yeah.
answering questions. And so
Make it from-
it might be worth coming up with a list and saying, these are the things we're struggling with. How do we collaborate effectively and legally, and how can we do these within the bounds of what we're allowed to do? That might be helpful.
I don't mean to be rude. I got
You think we do?
yeah,
Vision,
trumpet player.
It's about that time anyhow. Trumpet player.
Yeah,
See you later.
thanks, everybody.
Break a leg.
So hard.
But I would agree with Jennifer, though, that we want to make sure these keep going for you guys. So maybe that should be discussion item for the next.
The only other thing that came up last night that we talked in ahead of this meeting is it's difficult for a couple of the commissioners to make a 4 o'clock meeting. Because we always have this from 4 to 6 and people that work. One of our commissioners, she has to take PTO or she just can't come. So
Commissioner, runs the
Yeah.
let's swap.
Yeah, you seems pretty busy.
Yeah, meeting times are something we can adjust. So if as a group you decide, I mean, obviously staff has to be available too, but
would be helpful if it was later for some of our members.
So you guys want to go to a later time? And that's something we can make a decision now. It's 3 months out for the next joint city council meeting. It's up to you guys.
I'd like to see for later.
Figure out a time, I'll be there.
I've got a lot of flexibility in.
What are the staff constraints regarding that? Jenny, how are we? Staff, if we made it, what would your suggestion be?
I mean, it's tricky because we just lost our employee that supports these meetings too, so I don't,
You getting another one?
the hiring process is in the works, I think.
Okay. We're not.
Citizens of life also work like that.
It's a good point. That's a good point.
We're making it a bit challenging in some cases.
But I guess the question is how late, and we can get back to you, like how late would you like this to start?
I think we need to check with. Then I would say
You guys is normal time, 6, right?
6 maybe.
That one was always easier.
So it would be 6 to 8. De facto.
Just an idea. I'm going out there.
Also, we should switch to have the meetings.
Maybe Nick,
I'm out,
maybe the Creek Brewery.
That's good too.
Over there, I think you wanna go?
Yeah.
Why my voice is sounding like I'm Peter Brady in the.
No, would it be helpful for the commission, and I think this would extend to all the commissions, this Oregon government ethics is the governing body over these meeting laws. They have some online resources they're developing. I believe Oregon Police System has a program, but it's not certified by the commission quite yet. And those are available. We can make it a broadcast to all the members. But you can watch on your own time. I'll work on that.
Okay, we ready to get out of here?